hello, and welcome. Welcome to today's live. We are going to be jumping in talking about labor pain relief and what really works. So, if the thought of labor has you a bit nervous or you're feeling overwhelmed by that idea, don't worry, you are not alone. I am going to jump in and talk about the tried and true methods that really work to help manage labor pain, that will help you to feel empowered and ultimately help you to have a better birth experience. So, if you are pregnant, if this is your very first pregnancy, if you want to learn more about labor and the ins and outs, especially when it comes to pain relief, then you definitely want to stay tuned for this particular episode because we're going to get into all of it. With that being said, if this is your very first time joining one of my lives, my name is Stephanie Poole. I am a certified doula and lactation consultant. I help first-time moms transition into motherhood by helping them to have a confident birth and breastfeeding experience. So, if that is you, you are in the right place, and I'm so excited to have you here. Now, with that being said, if you've been on one of my lives before, you know I like to jump right in and get started. So without belaboring the time, and I do have my trusty tool here. You guys know I love to come prepared, right? Just because to me, it's important that if I'm going to show up, I show up to give it everything. And so, my notes here don't steer me wrong. They help me to stay focused and to make sure that I remember everything that I want you guys to know. So let's start by talking about, thank you for joining, by the way. Thank you for joining, by the way. I'm so glad you're here. All right. So when we're talking about labor pain, it's so important to understand that it's not just random pain. Hello, hello. Hello, hello. I'm so happy that you guys are joining. We're talking about labor pain relief. So if that's something you want to know more about, then stick around. When you understand the process of labor and the process of what it's like to actually have your body doing this natural progression, you start to understand that that pain actually comes with a whole lot of purpose. So you don't want to skip that step, and you don't want to get into this notion that you can give birth completely without having that labor process to happen. Now, with that being said, I want you to think about labor happening in waves. The contractions of labor actually happens in waves. So your goal should be to ride a wave instead of swimming against the wave, right? When it comes to contractions, first of all, if you want to have an idea as far as labor and what contractions feel like, let me know if you're on this live, if you have ever experienced birth before, or if this is your very first time. If it's your first time, put a 1. If you've already given birth, and so you may be giving birth again here shortly, give me a 2. If you've already experienced labor and you know what contractions feel like, a very accurate description of that is a very intense menstrual cramp. That's essentially what a contraction feels like. A very, very intense menstrual cramp. Now, the thing about labor is that those contractions start very mild, right? You're able to talk through them. There's a little discomfort, but you're still able to have a conversation. And they eventually increase with intensity to the point where you're no longer able to talk through them. You kind of have to take a minute. And the most effective thing you can do, we'll get into it in just a minute, is to start breathing through them, right? To help uh, deal with or help focus that energy so that you can get through that wave. And what will happen is your contractions will start very mild and very far apart. And then they will eventually become more intense and shorter together. But here's the good thing: the most intense part of labor is also the shortest part of labor. So right when you get to that point where you're like, oh my gosh, if these get any worse, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to do it. You can do it because you're right at the end. That's the good part. So always keep that in mind when we talk about pain. Now, I want to kind of shift the conversation to talk about natural pain techniques. The reason why I wanted to do this live is because I wanted to talk about labor pain, and I wanted to make sure we address both the non-medicated labor pain options for relief, as well as the medicated options for relief, because I want this video to be effective no matter what your birth plan is, right? If you are anticipating having a natural birth with no medicine or no pain intervention, I want this to be effective for you, as well as if you choose to have medication or some type of intervention for pain relief. So we're going to hop into both of those, and then I'll open up the floor. If you have questions, make sure you enter them in the chat. All right, I'm here with my notes, you guys. So for my natural pain relief, those of you that are looking to have a more natural birth experience, I want you to concentrate on your breathing techniques. Say this with me: your breathing techniques. Now, if you were on the live yesterday, I talked about this, which is simply to say, you have to prepare. If you plan to have a non-medicated birth, then you have to prepare your body before going into labor if you want a smoother transition into motherhood. Let me explain what I mean by that. There are certain stretches that you can do, prenatal stretches, and certain and getting movement in with walking, right? Staying mobile. Those two things alone will help your labor when that time comes. And you got to be committed to that. You got to be committed to that. If your birth plan, well, across the board, it helps with labor across the board, but especially if you don't plan to take advantage of any of the medical interventions to provide pain relief, then you have to do everything you can to optimize your birth experience so you reduce that pain from the very beginning. So the first two things I always suggest is the prenatal stretches and getting movement in. Now, outside of those, I want you to concentrate on breathing techniques. I'm going to try to remember to post it below, but I have a video that talks about some of the techniques that I do with my clients specifically when they're in labor to help them with that labor pain relief, right? Focused breathing is not just about staying calm. It actually, what happens is your body starts to relax when you can really master those breathing techniques. What happens is it helps your body to relax. And because you're able to relax, it reduces the stress, which reduces those stress hormones and allows you to then reduce that pain. Okay, so breathing techniques is not just to keep you calm. It actually helps to relieve some of the pain. The next thing I want you to think about is movement and positions. Y'all, this is so important. Hear me when I say, with my clients, I have seen a visible difference with being with a client and moving them, right? In while they're laboring, helping them to get into certain positions, right? And keeping them moving. Even listen to this, even if you happen to choose that you want an epidural. Some people think that once you get an epidural, that means you have to, that's it. You have to get in bed and that's it, which is technically true, but there are still movements that you can do while you're in the bed with the epidural. So even though I'm talking about natural labor relief, movements and positions applies to both birth options, whether you're medicated or non-medicated. So keep that in mind. But you definitely want to hone in on movement and positions. The third one I have is hydrotherapy. And someone asked me about this a couple live back. How do I feel about water births? And I think that they're a great option. I think if you are not high risk and there's no underlying issues with you or your baby, I think it is definitely worth speaking to your healthcare provider about, letting them know that this is something you're interested in, and then checking with your hospital or wherever you plan to give birth. And then you actually making sure that they offer that as an option. Most facilities are becoming more common at doing that. So having a water birth is getting to be more common even in hospitals. But if that is something that you're thinking about, it's awesome because it does actually help to ease some of those that labor pain, to give you some relief and to take that edge off. Okay. So those are the three I have. If you're like not if you're going to do the unmedicated natural birth route, I want to know if those three options are ones that you've considered. Let me know in the chat. The breathing techniques, the movement and position, or the what was the third? Oh, the water birth, the hydrotherapy. Let me know if you're open to either one of those, if not all of them. I personally try to cluster them when I can, to go back and forth and really offer the I think it works best when you're able to cluster some of those options together to get the best pain relief. So keep that in mind. Now, I want to jump to the medicated birth and some of those relief options that I have here. I want to say that off the top, sometimes we have this notion that if you have a medicated birth, somehow we're not running the full race, right? There's no award for which mom is struggling the most. If you know that your pain tolerance and your discomfort of pain you're very sensitive to that, then you need to honor that. Don't try to be a superhero because of what someone else did or something that you heard about. Do what truly aligns with you. So the first thing I want to offer in terms of what you need to know about, I want you to take this information, do your due diligence by researching it more, so that you know what aligns with you. The first one is on the medicated side. We've talked about the unmedicated. Now let's talk about medicated births. The first option you have, which is probably the most widely known about option, and that is an epidural. It is the most popular option, especially when you talk about hospitals, or if you're high risk for any reason. It is an option that is used, very often in the hospital. There's always going to be pros and cons to each. I can do a live to really talk about that. What are some pros to it? What are some cons to it? But essentially, the epidural is there and it really relieves the stress, and the pain from those intense contractions. Okay. It's going to be the highest level of comfort. That doing an epidural is always going to be your highest level of comfort. So if you're super sensitive to pain in any way, you want to consider that on your list as an option. Do your research, find out if that aligns with you and the type of birth that you want to have, and consider that one. The other way to get relief in a medicated birth situation is IV meds. Um, they often help to take the pain off, and at the same time, they can be administered in waves. So, as opposed to an epidural, which once it's implanted, it's there and you're getting that relief pretty much until the device is removed. An IV is more or less, it will give you a patch of coverage, right? While that medication is being administered. The third option is nitrous oxide, which is like what's known as laughing gas. That's actually an option. Some hospitals give it, some hospitals don't, but it is an option to help relieve that labor pain. Right? So we talked about the unmedicated options, which can also be used with the medicated options. So I want you to think about that as well. Even if you're having a medicated birth, you can still use some of those options to help in the early stages of labor, and to also help the labor progress, right? And then we have the medicated options that we just talked about. These are all important. I'm bringing them up to you because I have assisted clients who have used either one set of techniques or the other. And very often, most of my clients use a mix of both. A mix of both. They are having some sort of combination. And it really does land on what is most aligned with you. At the end of this, the biggest takeaway after I offer up all of these things, I want to encourage you to create a pain plan that is totally aligned with you and your birth and pain tolerance or capability. That is so important. Don't go by what I say. Don't go by what someone else tells you. You know you better than anybody else. And how you deal with pain and discomfort, you need to assess that. You need to understand, I have a pretty high pain tolerance or I have a pretty low one. You need to understand where you are on that bar. And the most important takeaway from this live is I want to encourage you to stay flexible. In other words, and I tell this to my clients all the time, we make a plan and we may start in one area, but I don't ever want you to feel like you can't pivot. Right? So let's say you're in the hospital and you've chosen that you wanted to have an unmedicated birth. Then we will go down that path for as long as you want to go. And very often we get all the way to the end. You're able to have that baby unmedicated, natural, just like what you planned. And I'm all for that. But there have been a few times where we start down that path and after a while, I have a mom telling me, hey, listen, I'm tired. I've tried this, I've done it, and I feel like I really need some relief to help get me through this pain. At no point does your self-worth change. And I want you to feel confident in knowing that. I want you to feel confident in understanding that making that pivot doesn't change how much of a birth story you'll still have. And sometimes I think, especially in today's society, sometimes I feel like women are often shamed about having to um, have some type of pain relief. What you do and how you decide to give birth is a complete autonomous decision. And I want to encourage you to stand in that power, because to me, that is really the gateway of you standing in the power that you're going to need to have when it comes to being a mother anyway. Anyway, you got to be able to make those what might seem like tough decisions at the time, but if it is truly what's best for you and what's best for a baby, you have to be able to stand in that. And so pick a pain management plan that truly is customized to you and your birth preferences. Stay flexible, stay open. Those things are always allowed to pivot. And if you are with a healthcare provider, a doula, or anyone on your birth team that's unsupportive of your options, no matter what they are or no matter how they might change, then you need to desperately reevaluate your birth team and who you have selected on there. If you feel like someone on your birth team may try to assert their strong opinions over what your preferences are, you got to be mindful of that. You got to be mindful of that before you go into labor, because that will make a difference in that labor pain and your ability to get relief. Listen, I hope this was helpful for you. As you can see, it's starting to get dark here. I am headed in. Thank you so much for joining me. I absolutely love being able to jump on and talk with you guys. I was a little late coming on today because of all the things going on, but I wanted to make sure I jumped in to talk about your options for labor pain relief and how to cope with them. Please consider each one. Do your own due diligence and deep dive, because they are all worth looking into. There are benefits, pros and cons for each one. And so I encourage you to really develop a plan that supports the type of birth that you want to have. Again, thank you so much for joining. And until next time, happy birthing, guys. Bye.